Yo, what up, gamers?
Gamers.
We're doing something a little different today. I'm here with Red, of course. We're hoping to get Chris and some other people to pop in to ask similar questions, but today we're doing something where we're going to discuss what and why we choose the medium of video games as our entertainment over television, movies, and things like that. So, Red, what drew you to video games specifically? Was it something important?
Well, no. I've been playing video games since the moment I was old enough to pick up a controller and put it in my hand. I started with an Atari and then a Sega Genesis, or I started with the Sega Genesis first and then an Atari, went back to the Sega Genesis and worked my way up from like 2004 all the way up to 2010, just playing everything I could get my hands on.
Was it like an emotional thing? Was it? I know I'm neurodivergent. I don't know your
Yeah.
stance on that.
I grew up incredibly isolated, so it was a good way to break outside of the room that I sat in and stared at all day long for years and go somewhere else, whether it was a virtual place or not. It was the breakaway that really sold it for me.
Escapism.
Yeah,
Would you find, or would you argue that video games have like a visceral reaction with you when you play them?
only in some instances, the medium, for instance.
Where you really connect to it?
Yeah, and there's a lot of personal, and it's not just personal, it's told well enough that you can empathize or you can sympathize even if you've never experienced it.
I don't know if you're in the same boat with me on this one, but I started on the Sega Genesis as well. That was the first console I ever had, and I was
Mm.
playing Aladdin, Lion King, and Sonic Hedgehog 2. And for me, it wasn't so much escapism. I grew up in the suburbs. For me, it was I'm autistic, so television gives me no reactionary impulse. To me, you're just staring at a moving picture with sounds. When I play a video game, I feel like I'm invested in something. I'm using my brain, I'm using my hands, I'm getting involved in it. And that form of media gives me a lot. Do you have anything in that same realm?
I like the more involvement you give the player, the more inclined the player is to return. You asked me earlier what I thought about Zenith and why I was so hyped for it. It's
Yeah,
the freedom experience that it's offering. It's something that's not real life, so I can easily draw my finite border. It's something that's easy to get behind, so there's a ton of stuff to do, and everything is accessible to everyone. I got hyped for it because it's a game that's made for everyone to be anything. There's this real level of discovery that goes with a game like that.
I would say there's a real level to discovery for almost any game.
Not true, right? Where a level of discovery might exist for the original Legend of Zelda, that same discovery was kind of lost throughout its later entries and replaced with the feeling of well, I don't want to say like ego, but heroics.
Would you say that's
Became
a product of us playing more video games, possibly, or no? Would you argue no?
I would argue no. I would argue that just somewhere along the line, it became less for a game like that about the exploration and more about the adventure and its main character, and that's a fine instance. But that feeling of discovery is special.
I
It it,
agree.
it adds something.
Yeah,
Video
I
games are
agree.
like food. They're a fine harmony. You never take anything out unless it's just atrocious. You only add stuff in. You make better.
So like a progress kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like you're not gonna play Call of Duty Combat Vault and then move forward to like Halo 5 and be like, wow, it's just like Combat Evolved all over again. That's not what you're
Yeah.
looking for.
Call of Duty Combat Evolved though.
It's an interesting dichotomy for me, because video games not only like give me a sense of escapism, but they also give me like a feeling of I'm experiencing something impossible. I'm discovering the impossibilities. Like, obviously, we can't experience a real life zombie outbreak. We can simulate a real life zombie outbreak, but like playing Dying Light or Dying Light 2 or Resident Evil or something along those lines is it's a completely different experience from your day to day life.
It breaks that mold that you become so accustomed to, provides an excitement.
Yeah.
Dopamine in the brain gets flowing.
Always chasing that dopamine, boy. It's an interesting conversation to me because I feel like a lot of people have psychological differences towards their, oh, let's say, interest in video games. Like some people are extremely competitive and they might only play esports titles because they want that adrenaline rush. And it seems like
Sure.
their
Hold on
data.
one second. Open
Okay,
the door.
I'm just gonna keep going. Their day to day life might not be all that competitive. Like I have a lot of friends who are doing, sit down desk jobs and things like that. And when they get home, they want to play something like Call of Duty. It's a lot higher octane. But my life, being a skateboarder, ATV racer, and things like that, I'm interested in a more calmer experience in my day to day life. Sometimes sitting down and playing something like Skyrim or Oblivion and just wandering is exactly what I'm looking for, that sense of adventure. So, video games really answer that calling. Where if I were to sit down and watch, like, Lord of the Rings, I mean, there's nothing wrong with Lord of the Rings, but once you know the story, it's kind of over at that point for me as somebody who's watching it. I already can predict the events of the movie, and very rarely does a movie have, say, a bad ending. Video games,
Bad.
ooh, video games often have bad endings, and they show a completely different sense of emotion that many of the times you can't get from television or movies.
That is what makes a game like The Elder Scrolls so great.
I was just
It's the
saying that,
total
yeah.
freedom.
That total freedom is so special. Oh my god, that's gonna
More
become a
special
meme.
than more special than a linear experience, but in a different way than a linear experience. Not it doesn't outweigh how special something linear can be, but the freedom is irreplaceable.
Oh, I agree. But like I was saying, I know you walked away, so I'm gonna reiterate myself a little bit here. Um, People who don't have very high adrenaline lifestyles, they don't BMX, skateboard, downhill, race, those kinds of things. Like you and I are both more of a adrenaline seeking people. Um, so we don't tend to exercise ourselves in Call of Duty, PUBG, Battle Royales because we can get a very high dopamine level from going to the skate park. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a we can push ourselves physically to do things that provide a similar level of excitement to the things that we get to do in game. Well, I couldn't always do that though. I don't know if you remember, but I was 395 pounds at one point. I
Yes.
was massive. I couldn't hop on a skateboard or get on a bike and just get off and go because it just my weight wasn't allowing it. It wasn't happening. Gravity wasn't on my side. So video games provided a way for me to experience things even if I didn't have to get up. And I know that sounds terrible, but when you grow up in the situation I did, it kind of really is literally the only option I had.
Let's go back to that time period of your life. We don't need to dig into your emotional state or anything like that. But when you were a gamer in those days, I know you were playing a lot of Tony Hawk and things like that. Were these things that you were experiencing through the medium video games with the desire to do in real life?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it was always little things, I would see when I would play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, it was the desire to go out and not be a skater necessarily, but experience the same feeling of being in the air and the freedom that you get of being a skater, the sense of adventure that a game like Tony Hawk's Underground gives you. Because whether or not it's a great story, it has a decent enough story in it about just comeuppance, that hero syndrome, I guess.
I definitely suffer from hero syndrome. Big time. Like no joke, my mother to this day says that like if there's ever like a bank robbery and I'm involved in being a hostage or something, I'm most likely to act and try to stop it. Like I suffer from hero syndrome real bad. But that's interesting because I know you're using Tony Hawk here as we both are using Tony Hawk here as an example, but Tony Hawk never did that for me. And I'm wondering if that's a psychological difference between you and I because yes, I had my problems as a child, but I was still able to go skateboarding and go biking and things like that. Um,
Whereas, like, I stayed in one place for such a long period of time that options just didn't exist for me.
yeah. So when Skate 1 came out, that was my big game because it was a way to do tricks and see tricks that I couldn't perform in real life.
See, that came I got to the skate games at a totally different period in my life. By the time I got to those, I was way more interested in the design and the dichotomy of video games being taken apart and put together versus playing video games and experiencing them. Like that was the earliest part of my dev phase. So I started looking into skate and looking at how its mechanics worked, seeing its models in motion, really kind of piecing together what all of it was put together with. And that was the most interesting part of that series for me.
So
How
that
technical it was for the time period.
that's interesting because around that time I was let's see, Skate 1 would have been junior year of high school, I think. I'm old. Um, that would have been around the time period where I would have been like beginning my college classes and things like that. Because I don't know if you guys know this, I started college 2 years prior. Um, I didn't have that escapism at that point in my life. I didn't play video games that much at that point in my life. I got injured. This is a story I don't tell too often, but I'm sure you know what I'm telling. I got injured late into college. I shattered my ankle skateboarding. I had to get, I think it was 3 surgeries on my ankle, and that is what made me a gamer. That is when I finally sat down and played Warframe. Actually, that
You
was
didn't
the
really have
game.
much a choice. You were literally forced to sit down because you had a broken ankle.
Yeah. And ever since then, video games have been extremely important. Up to that point in my life, the only time I watched television was Halloween. I watched horror movies in October.
I
Um,
don't have very many good memories growing up, but every memory I can trace back that is good typically involves video games in some form or another.
would you say that video games are like a security blanket to you?
No, I
No.
could do or do without them, but the fact that they exist really did help in the long run. I was always also a fan of literature, cinema, things that always surrounded everybody growing up. So if I had grown up at a time before or after video games, it really wouldn't have made too much of a difference. I would have ended up the same way about something else.
So,
If the circumstances were differently timed, but not different in situation, I would have ended up the same.
so what's the most important thing about video games to you? Most important, 100%. Like let's remove development and things like that, and that's just emotionally
Creativity.
creativity. I can
Yep.
respect that.
Creating things is the human condition. It is what we do. And emotionally, there's nothing more respectable than that. I love how creative things get. And creativity isn't just in the mind of the developer or the person creating the game, it's also in the mind of the player. How do you solve the situations that you're put up against? How do you break the game mechanics that you're presented with to become a speedrunner or a no death player? How do you really take advantage and use the creative things that are laid out in front of you as both the player or the developer to continue keeping yourself invested in whatever's in front of you?
It's super interesting. Um,
When a game has no creativity, right? That's when a game loses my interest.
yeah, that's because I feel like a lot of people like games that aren't all that creative. A lot of it is. I mean, you've said in the past you were a big Call of Duty player, so how do you reflect on that?
I reflect on that like Call of Duty had a period where I knew for a fact it wasn't creative. It was always the Medal of Honor ripoff, but it did certain things that acted differently and independently. So when I lost Medal of Honor and Call of Duty was all I had, I didn't mind switching over from one game to another. That being said, Call of Duty is a terrible experience. The community was extremely toxic to me. Everything about that game was a lack of creativity. The reason I played Call of Duty so adamantly was because the developers at Treyarch had the creativity to come up with some of the most elaborate Easter eggs in history in a side game mode that had nothing to do with the game.
It's super interesting. What a unique take.
Zombies was the thing that sold Call of Duty for me. And you know what? It wasn't even because of the zombies or the setting. It was always the Easter eggs and how absolutely outlandish they were.
To this day, are you still Easter egg hunting?
I've been an Easter egg hunter in video games across the board for as long as I can remember, just not in Call of Duty anymore. Their community burned me pretty bad, and after that, and the last game I played, I was like, yeah, that's the end of that. I should have let Medal of Honor die in my heart when it did, but then if I did, I wouldn't have gotten to experience the Easter eggs. Like Shangri-La was an amazing Call of Duty Easter egg experience.
That's
It's the one
super
of the most
cool.
complicated Easter eggs ever created.
Awesome. That's so cool. For me, if you don't mind me switching topics,
Yeah.
for me, video games always provided a sense of challenge. Um, I know I don't always play games on the highest difficulty, but I know you and I don't see eye to eye on this one. You like to play on the highest difficulty very often. You've said that before. For me, I like I like when they present objectives that are difficult. It That dopamine rush that you get when you complete something always feels really special to me. We've had this conversation about rare games in the past where I don't like collectathons, and that's kind of one of the reasons why collectathons never worked for me. Um, when you play something like Halo on Legendary or Halo on Heroic, you need to be in a flow state. You need to be you're at your best. You know what I mean?
It's interesting that you say that because it also kind of akins back to the Elder Scrolls. We played that a little while ago, and every time you play through Oblivion, it's always the main quest. I've never seen you branch out into the Thieves Guild or the Dark Brotherhood or the Fighters Guild or anything of that nature because you like a clear point A to point B.
Yes.
You like the feeling of accomplishment, a completion, a closure, I guess is the right word.
Closure does make me feel really good. And I think that's one of the conflicting interests that I'm having with The Last of Us is now that I'm replaying it and experiencing the story with the information that I have, and I'm trying to remain spoiler free because I am playing it. Um, there is a lot of inconclusive events that take place that are unsatisfactory to my instinctual personality, where I want to be a hero. I want to be, I want to be John 117. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because I'm not John 117 in real life. I'm not a hero. I'm not saving the day. I'm not president. I'm not
You
making
have what I
executive
like to
orders.
call you have what I like to call a Goku complex.
I did grow up loving Dragon Ball Z, so that's not a big surprise. But the only issue with video games that I'm facing today is, and this isn't for every video game, of course, and I'm going to be doing a broad assumption. Battle royales don't do that for me anymore.
Battle royales don't do anything for anyone.
but even first person shooters, I have no interest in hopping on Battlefield 5 or Battlefield 2046 or whatever, because there is no sense of accomplishment after you've played 3 years of Halo 3. You get to platinum or whatever that rank was, and you play, Battlefield Bad Company 2 and things like that, and or in my case, 4, being a competitive Battlefield 4 player. Um, I've done it enough. You know what I mean? I
I
want to
had
play.
mentioned to you I had mentioned to you yesterday that I had been playing Zenith for quite some time now, and I'm only still barely at a level 20, right? And
Yes.
you had said that that wasn't exactly great. And I would make the argument that that is exactly what I'm looking for. I'm progressing through Zenith's main story and its quests at such a comfortable pace that there's no grinding anywhere. It doesn't feel like I'm overworking myself for the sake of moving on to just progress a little bit. I'm actually moving as if I will reach an end at some point and then have to come back to continue later after more comes. There will be closure for me for this. And it's not going to take me getting to level 50 to do it. It's not going to take me doing every side quest in the world, seeing every dungeon. But it is going to take me continuing just to go through it as I have been. I've still barely seen a fourth of the entire world map. So there's a lot of it that I haven't gotten to scratch yet.
It's interesting because I'm excited for Zenith as well. I'm excited to play it with you and things like that. Um, and I'm playing Pokemon Arceus right now. I'm doing it off stream. It's what
Yeah.
I've been kind of focused
We
on.
both kind of wound up on a game, locked on one game that we've been waiting for.
Yeah. And one of my biggest problems with Pokemon Arceus is I want to stop playing it. I want to finish it. But the end game is bad. The game up to this point has been absolutely incredible. Easily one of the best Pokemon games I have ever played. And then I
It's
reached
the
the end.
XP thing.
Yep. Then I reached the end. And I can't stop. That hero complex, I have not saved the day. I caught Diagla.
Dialga.
Thank you. And Palkia. And I know that there's more that needs to be done. You know what I mean? I know Giratina is still loose. I know other things need to be taken care of, and I need to get the plates to Arceus.
So so I hear you saying this, right? And I can't help but wonder to myself if you might not exactly be the biggest fan of Monster Hunter.
Oh,
I can
I
tell that
hate
you're a
it.
Monster Hunter player. Yeah, I see. I
Yeah.
can't. That's one of those. I love Monster Hunter because I'm comfortable knowing that the end will come at some point. If the ending is bad, the ending is bad, right? And there's really not much that there's no argument against that.
Mhm.
But I am always comfortable knowing that the end is coming.
I'm just gonna finish my thought real quick. Um, what they did with Pokemon Arceus is just bad pacing. What I see with Zenith and your experience with Zenith is the developers understand pacing.
Oh yeah.
And
Absolutely. They understand pacing perfectly.
and with your argument of Monster Hunter or conversation of Monster Hunt rather, Monster Hunter, it's so much patience, and that's my biggest problem with Monster Hunter is everything is so tedious, and I can't enjoy that.
Which Monster Hunter title have you played that made you feel that way?
What was this? I didn't play Rise because that's not out yet. The one before that,
World.
yeah.
Okay, I could see that. It wasn't exactly a great experience. I think you would much prefer an experience like the original Monster Hunter on the PS2 or maybe Monster Hunter 3 on the Wii. Like if I told anybody to play any Monster Hunter game to experience a good game with good closure and really good pacing, Monster Hunter 3 on the Wii is a great way to go.
I mean, we could definitely do it for the show at some point. I can't promise that I'll get through it, but I'll try it.
Oh yeah. Even if it's not a great experience for you, I guarantee it'll be a better experience than whatever you went through with World. I didn't care for that one either. I'm just a Monster Hunter fan, so I still played through it. I love Capcom. Everything they do is godlike to me, so I couldn't really put it down for being a bad entry in an otherwise pretty okay series.
I mean, you're talking to the guy that streamed the PSP version of Assassin's Creed Bloodlines. I think I can
You're
handle it.
also you're also talking to as much as I love that sense of freedom. I'm also the guy that plays Resident Evil.
Hmm.
That is my favorite video game franchise, and I can't think of a franchise more linear.
Uncharted.
Fucking, that's not a game. That's a movie. That's a garbage movie, and you know it.
Assassin's Creed?
And well, those aren't linear technically, right? There is a sense of exploration to them, but it's not a good one.
I mean, fair enough. I don't think there's anything wrong with enjoying linear story structures. I like plenty of linear story structures, but then again, I grew up earlier than you. I'm not going to say you
I
have less gaming experience, but
I
um,
like a good division. If a linear game is trying to emulate an open world and attempts to be something it's not, and it just kind of fakes you out and provides this landscape full of nothing, then it feels empty and it feels lifeless, right? So a linear game pretending to be something that it isn't, always hurtful. That's where Assassin's Creed falls into play.
Okay. What I was gonna say was I have plans on playing Dead to Rights with you for this show. I also have plans to play Max Payne 1 and 2 with you for this show. And these are games that I would consider extremely linear. The story structure is 100% laid out before you.
But the
But
difference is in the execution ultimately.
mhm. And they're two of one of my favorite games of all time, technically four games. And they're extremely linear. But I like the story.
Yeah. Max Payne doesn't thrust you into this pseudo open world that lies to you by trying to convince you that there's an open world happening around you.
Off GTA 3. Um
Honestly,
yeah, I
GTA 2, old video games that tried open world stuff did the same thing.
mean that's one of the reasons why I think Morrowind is such an accomplishment. It had a lot.
Man, it had a lot.
Yeah.
I started playing through Morrowind just by itself. I switched between the More Oblivion mod for Oblivion and Morrowind by itself, and just a straight-edged comparison of the two. Morrowind was so special for its 2002. Morrowind drops onto the planet. Biggest game ever made by that point. I can almost guarantee no other game on the planet had both more text, more shit to see, and a bigger draw distance.
Right. But
It's really something special.
getting back to like the main topic, I'm neurodivergent. I've clarified that. So, video games have always been an extremely visceral experience for me. Like I had said, television does nothing for me. If I'm not watching, an extremely over animated anime, regular television is extremely boring. The only time I really enjoy watching something is in bed, and it's usually YouTube short form factor content. I'll watch a movie here and there with you guys, but odds are you'll never catch me just watching a show.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. I bring up television a lot. You don't know a lot of the references I make. It kind of makes me sad, but at the same time, I get it. It's hard to get invested in something when your focus is so easily shifted. You need to be dragged into it, and you really do kind of feel the things that you see. That
I'm also
that's a big part of the experience for everybody.
I'm also kind of I'm not going to say I'm an empath because I'm not, but I am emotionally attuned to what's happening. Not always. Like obviously everybody has their issues with reading the room, but a lot of the time the acting and things like that in like live performances say a lot about the production, and sometimes things just aren't portrayed well, and I just don't care. That's one of the reasons why I actually was able to watch something like Breaking Bad. The story and its acting was extremely good.
The then I think you would get I think you would appreciate a YouTube channel like Your Movie Sucks, right?
Mhm.
Instead of watching TV or movies, you get a perspective on them that lays them out unsubjectively, gives you a front to back look at how they
Mhm.
play out, and then provides his opinion, which typically is just a technical breakdown. It's not even really an opinion.
Wait,
Here's a
is your
like
movies sucks our podcast, but
oh
movies?
my no, Your Movie Sucks is a review channel.
Oh,
I'm gonna send you that.
cool. Shout out to them.
He did he did Cool Cat Saves the Kids way back in the day. He was the guy that sparked all of the lawsuits from what's his name about Cool Cat Saves the Kids.
Interesting. Very interesting. Um, but being more emotionally attuned to things, and I know this will come off really weird. Silent Hill, I talk about a lot. Um, I like Silent Hill 1 a lot. It's easily one of my favorite games of all time. And the voice acting and things like that were not very good. But I could still resonate with these characters because I was viscerally involved in what is happening. It was my inclination to study the world that I'm in to understand why it's occurring. And so many people played through this title not understanding fully what was happening. To
I
this,
love a good story where you have to know what you have to be perceptive enough to understand what you're seeing.
I want to.
Realism is a hard thing to understand.
Oh, yeah. And post irony, even harder. And I'm not a zoomer, so post irony goes right over my head 82% of the time.
No, it's just yeah, it's so up front and abhorrent everywhere.
I just want to drop a bombshell onto people. So, if you're ever watching Silent Hill content, if you find yourself ever watching Silent Hill content, blah blah blah, um, people always say Alessa was burned. She was burned by the cult. I want everybody to know that the second any channel says this, they are incredibly incorrect and their content should not be trusted because they did not play the game. Alessa was not burned. Her soul was split, and during that separation, the fire occurred accidentally.
Ladies and gentlemen, he's going on about Silent
That's
Hill
all
1
I
again.
that's all I have to say. It's really annoying. And
I think
go
I
ahead.
think that's, being able to recognize this, being as passionate as you just were about a story like that is a good show of just how much the story got its community thinking,
Yes.
right? That's what breeds passion. A game like Five Nights at Freddy's would have gotten absolutely nowhere had the few tiny pieces of intrigue from the
Ooh.
community not exploded.
Now, this brings me to a really interesting question because uh, I understand that you're what almost 10 years younger than me or something like that, 7 years younger than me.
Yeah.
How did you feel seeing video games shift at that time period?
What do you mean? By the time, okay, so by the time I was smart enough to recognize the quality in video, we were talking about skate games, and I was talking about my developer phase. I started wanting to learn to develop video games around 2010 when I played Skate 2 for the first time,
Okay.
and that was what kind of led me down this path of like playing video games from the internet, playing retro video games, downloading emulators, really getting exploratory with how video games as an entire history went.
Yeah.
So I've got this big backlog and catalog of knowledge about video game history that I have tucked away underneath this pile of information that was just upfront available from the time period. When I was growing up, it wasn't like this for you, but when I was growing up, video games of every different visual style, gameplay, and everything already existed. Technology was 100%. Yes, I was born with like the GameCube and the PS2, but I lived on the Xbox 360 and the PC. And with those two things in front of me, you kind of begin to see everything. Indie games especially. I spent so much time on Game Jolt around that time that indie games especially provided such a diverse catalog. I couldn't even keep track of them. I have been able to catalog hundreds of thousands of games in the back of my mind from dating back from Windows 3.1 forward, but I couldn't tell you dick about the history of indie games because there are so many. Nobody could I couldn't even be I there I you could consider games from the Windows 3.1 era indie games because of the size of them, but like population inflation, I guess.
I,
There was so much that it was overloaded.
I guess
Is the thing
that's,
about it.
that's interesting. Like, so would you say that like your feeling towards the indie boom of that time period in your youth is complicated?
Yeah, it's very complicated because there are a lot of things I love and a lot of things I don't love, and I have to treat indie games as their own space. I know that. But treating them as their own space, also growing up how I have over the years, I've seen how people begin, I've seen how people progress. So when I see somebody make hundreds of games and never do anything to one up themselves or get any better at what they do, it bothers me. And those people are the people that are creating indie games en masse. There are tons of icebergs, developers creating accidental shovelware is what I call it, because you can tell they have a clear passion and they know what they're doing. It's not like something like Life of Black Tiger on PS4. It's something that somebody cared about at one point and then they just got super fucking lazy with and never did anything better than that. They set their own standards for themselves so low that it just wasn't worth keeping my attention on.
So coming back to like Five Nights at Freddy's, then is that a game that when it came out you understood the popularity and you could see why people resonated with it? Or let's use Slender Man if it's easier.
I was actually very, you know me, I'm a guy of horror, so I was very, very interested in both of those.
Okay.
I was 12 years old. I was 11 years old when Slender the Eight Pages came out, and I was really big into YouTube at the time. I was watching PewDiePie back then, you know?
Hmm.
I was that kid. So it kind of,
Here I
it was just,
was living in a dosh house and in college when these things were big. So for me, when the indie games came out, it was such a, I don't know what to say, um, uninspired thing for a time period where I was like, oh, that's kind of dumb. But at that, I grew out of that.
I was a squeaker making YouTube videos, so I loved whatever was put in front of me for the most part. I started just appreciating things, whether they were bad or good, until they started overflow. It was just after Slender the Eight Pages when everything got fucking out of hand, and I just couldn't keep up anymore.
So because it's a complicated feeling, obviously. So you would say you would have to discuss the specifics.
Like a game like Slender, I would have to give its own conversation to outside of indie games because of all of the indie games that spawned from Slender. And then there was the swell of Five Nights at Freddy's fan games. Totally the exact same situation, you know, it was just that reincarnated for a two. It was the eight pages 2.0 moment. It was when indie games became so overflowed again that I totally lost interest and I had to move back into the AAA space. Or look at other double A indie games like Celeste, Read Only Memories, which Read Only Memories is a very, very emotional experience, very worth playing.
So would you say that the complicated feelings that you feel towards indie games are the same way you look at something like Final Fantasy?
No. Final
No.
Fantasy, I know how I feel about that.
Okay.
From beginning to end, that's just a story that I wish would have ended when it began.
Let's not go any further because we do have plans to have a conversation
Yeah.
about Crystal Chronicles
And
later
I
on.
have and I have plenty of opinions about each of the games individually, things I like, things I don't like.
Mhm.
It'll come down to like circumstance in the moment.
So we'll come back to that at a later date. So if you guys are interested in that, subscribe. We'll be talking about Final Fantasy later
Let's do
on.
so. Let's say something that not many people say anymore. Suggest things you'd like us to
Oh
do in
yeah,
the
of course.
comments.
Yeah, of
You know how many
course.
people don't address their audience anymore directly? It's so
Yeah.
sad to not have a sense of personality.
And we thankfully we have actually some people recommending things to me. Of course, it's just close friends who just want to hear what we're talking about. But we also have Meep, Chris, Eden, several other people who are letting us know what they want us to talk about. So if you're interested in joining the conversation as well, join the Discord. You're more than
Yeah,
welcome to come in.
there's
Um,
plenty of good folk, good dudes.
I just wanted to add to your conversation that you had about indie titles because my experience was so much different, and people might be interested in that. So for me, Xbox 360 would have been releasing the end of my middle school career, I believe. That's what
5.
2007, five. So I didn't get an Xbox 360 until about 2007. Um, that's when I played Halo 3 for the first time. I had still been playing Halo 2 up to that point. Just to give everybody an idea, I grew up on no other option. There was Tomb Raider, Bubsy, Tony Hawk 3. The video game industry was different. On the news, there were a lot of conversation that video games are bad and you shouldn't let your kids play video games. A lot of stuff like that. They're breeding violence. There was a lot of that, which,
Totally opposite end of the spectrum for me. I
yeah.
grew up with every video game imaginable.
Eh,
And it wasn't even we were very poor, we were broke. They came from obscure places and small stores and, you know, penny locations. It was just a massive collection of old junk that happened to be video games that my parents liked.
it's interesting because You grew up in a household where your parents played video games then, or parent, or
No,
however. I don't know.
they did before I was around, apparently. And then when I was born, I never saw any of them play video games. My mom played
Interesting.
the PlayStation 3 like twice when I got older, and that was about the extent of it.
I have never seen either one of my parents play a video game. I only saw my stepdad play World at War for a little while.
I can think back to like the one of the only good memories I have of my dad is sitting back watching him play through Aladdin on the Sega Genesis. He just would yeet through the whole game, get to the end, and save his apples up till the end and cheese the hell out of the final boss. And he was totally happy with that.
Interesting.
Yeah. I
So,
don't think I don't think very good of him, but I that is a good memory.
um, that was a lot to take in, homie. Okay. Um, Growing up in a time period where there was a political climate against video games made it really difficult for me to experience video games because me being somebody who was hobbyist in the video game space at that time was very commonly told I shouldn't play video games by my parents. Growing up in the 90s and early 2000s and becoming a teenager in the early 2000s was difficult because you had a lot of friends who were their parents didn't give a shit. They let their kids play video games and whatever they want and things like that. However, I didn't have it that way. I didn't truly get to experience video games until my 20s. So when I finally got a PC, now mind you, I've always had a PC. I've always had an Xbox. You know what I mean? Always had some form of video game console growing up. But I never got anything
It was
M-rated.
restrictive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Spyro, games that I didn't enjoy now. Like I
My
don't
mom did
reflect on
so
well.
much shit. I could play anything from the library. Resident Evil 4, I started playing when I was very, very young. I saw it the first time in 2005 when my brother Nicholas played it, and she had no problem. Just, it was whatever. As long as I didn't see boob, my mom didn't care what I looked at.
It's such an interesting. Like I wasn't even allowed to have my Xbox in my bedroom until I was much older.
I I wasn't either technically, but like I didn't sleep in my bedroom. I didn't really I shared my bedroom, so it was me in my living room sleeping in my living room with the Xbox in the living room going all the time.
Interesting.
Uh, Growing up watching YouTube, and if I wasn't watching YouTube, I was making YouTube stuff or playing weird games or working on my single core PC with Windows XP trying to get it to run shit that there was no way it was ever going to run.
I remember those days.
A
Because I had
lot of experimentation.
when I start just to give everybody a perspective of my age, when I started college, Windows XP was still the main computer platform.
Ugh. Oh man, I feel so bad for you.
You don't have to
You
feel bad.
fucking boomer.
I mean, I say it all the time. Like I'm turning 30. That's just the way it is. That's something I need to come to terms with. But when I went into college, nobody played video games. Like it was very expensive. We were, groomed by politicians that they were bad.
You
Um,
also, I also should attest some of that to the locations in which we grew up.
okay,
I
yes,
grew up very rural. You grew up very city.
yes,
You're, a lot closer to the Northeast where there's politics everywhere. Washington, D.C. is up there.
yep, right down the
That's
road.
where most of our politics are handled. And then the rest of the world kind of wasn't like that. My brother went to college. My brother Sebastian went to college around the same time as you. And he had a totally different experience. A lot of dudes played video games. There were a lot of bands. There was a lot of uh, interest in technology, but this is a very technologically inclined area. New Mexico is the heart and soul of technology.
Yes, and I live in New York, and where I specifically lived was extremely close to Niagara Falls, the city, and Buffalo and Toronto. Which, if you don't know, the political climate of this area is trash.
Garbage.
It is a purple state that everybody is at each other's throat constantly. That is just what we do here. We also have Keemstar, which sucks.
I live in a bright red corner of a very blue state.
Must be nice. Must be nice. So, we had a lot of, and I hate to talk about this, but you know me. I made a whole entire music video on this concept on my YouTube channel at one point, discussing this whole news and media and commercial outlook on video games and how negatively it was perceived in my childhood, and how it affected me, and the things that I've seen and how the economy has
Who
shown
was
me.
the guy, the old guy who ran the campaign against violent video games?
You're talking
The
about the
lawyer dude.
lawyer dude that got disbarred.
Yeah.
I don't remember his name, but he was an idiot, and I hate him. Looking back on it,
It's I know it was a part of video game history, but I just wasn't there to experience that. I didn't even know I knew jack shit about politics until I was 14. So like nobody's politics or opinions meant anything to me. I said it as I perceived.
you would have been like 6 years old when this all happened too, which is
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah, I would have found out like fucking a decade later almost.
That's crazy. I remember watching the news and just being like, this isn't fair. This isn't true. These are all allegations of lies.
And he was leading so many people. Like
Suing
that was a big part of the
Rockstar,
problem.
suing Capcom, suing Konami. Like, not good. And your parents aren't always keen on that kind of stuff. So, that made it difficult as well. And I think that's what pushed me. And I was always a loner, skateboarder, things like that. I didn't do team sports. Um, and I think that's also why video games resonated with me. So I do have a very high emotional connection to being a gamer. I think there's a lot of things and steps in my life, from mental illness to, being hurt in skateboarding and meeting you guys, of course, that made me into somebody who's just passionate for video games. I love the medium so much for those reasons.
The medium is a fantastic experience. It's also a very disturbing experience, but that's a whole other thing. It I would say that like a game like the medium where you can see clear passion put into it and the terror doesn't come from extreme gore despite the body horror and the monsters. The terror doesn't come from extreme gore. It comes from the psychological feelings it puts you through, right? And even then
Yes.
I always make the argument that you should draw a very finite line between fantasy and reality and remember that that line exists. Remembering that there is that line there and that this fantasy isn't real is important. And that's how practically everybody thinks.
Hmm. It's the same thing with film, and this is going to be a weird comparison, but um, Marley and Me, the movie, is a very real film. It really makes you feel for the dog and the character and how everything is being portrayed and the events that unfold. And I don't think, in my experience, there's too many films like Marley and Me that invoke so much emotion. Invoke,
You
whatever.
you mentioned Once Upon a Time, the movie A Boy and His Dog.
Oh yeah.
Inspired Fallout was a very strange movie.
Hmm.
And that's a similar situation. That's a very emotion provoking. We watched Hard Candy.
Yes.
That was a very disturbing movie.
But these are films that I enjoy for those reasons. And I think that's another reason why video games are so important to me, is because I can play Fallout New Vegas and have that emotional connection to what's happening. I could play Fallout 3 and be like, "Yes, we have to save the wasteland. Like, this is a genuine problem."
I play a game like Fallout, Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 3, and when you enter the shoes of the player, knowing that sometimes when you say something, it could absolutely make a difference,
Yeah.
it really changes your perspective. Everything you say is carefully orchestrated per playthrough, depending on who you are in that world. That I've
Mass
never played
Effect.
a game of Fallout New Vegas where I wasn't like, I would make this decision right here. Out of these things, these options, this is the decision that I would most likely make.
I think that's one of the things that made Mass Effect when I was growing up so important and so special, is like, I know it wasn't one of the first games that do what it did, but at the time
It was a good
it was
example of
doing it.
doing what it did.
Yeah. We look back on it kind of poorly, but I still to this day say it's a great game.
Knights of the Old Republic 2,
Yep. Jedi Academy.
Jedi Academy. Very good.
But it's
As much
fun.
as
Go ahead.
Dragon Age as a series, not great. Dragon Age Origins as a game,
Okay.
another game where things mean something.
We always rip on Dragon Age. I think every single episode we ripped on Dragon Age at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, how could we not? I mean, what even is Dragon Age?
It wasn't really until Bloodborne, where I mean Warframe did it, but Warframe was this I'm hurt, I have no money, this is what I'm gonna play kind of thing. But Bloodborne was the first video game where I played through it and I got to the end and I had that extreme visceral reaction. And I was like, this is video games? This is sick. I'm going to play more of them. And, obviously up to that point I had played Oblivion and things like that. And these games gave me that
I
same
had that feeling.
reaction.
I had that same feeling for the very first time, and like realized I had that feeling when I played through BioShock Infinite for the first time.
Oh, so good. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Same thing. Making you question the reality that you're living in. No film has ever done that. Video games
It
give you
really
that.
it makes you the whole time you're emotionally invested in each character, not because you feel for them or even know much about them, but because they provide enough for you to stay curious about them. You really want to know more about who you are and why you're here.
Yeah.
There's this driving force pulling you forward that where you have no clue why you're moving forward, and but you will maybe eventually, as long as you keep going forward.
It's almost like this bizarre meta commentary on like it's not just a video game, it's discussing how you think, it's discussing it's questioning, making you question things in real life. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean,
I learned a lot from video games growing up. There is a lot of real world history and real world knowledge to be taken from video games, as long as you know what exactly counts as real world knowledge worth being taken.
agreed. Agreed. And just real quick, I'm not saying that films can't invoke that feeling. I don't know if I'm using that word correctly, but like Memento and Seven, they did the same thing for me. They made you question things. Um, Pulp Fiction is another one, and um,
Kill Bill.
Kill Bill. Yep, there's a lot of that in those kind of films. But when I see those films, I'm like, oh, this would make a really good video game.
Yeah.
Like, uh, Alice in
I feel
Wonderland.
that way about some things, things that would make a better video game than a movie and games that would make a better movie than a video game. It's all too common.
Hmm. Yeah. Like Netflix is trying out their new interactive thing with the Minecraft series and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I see stuff like Man of Medan, and this is subjective opinion. I just want to make that clear. I feel like Man of Medan could really work in that kind of setting.
I think it could, but it would so many things that make Man of Medan stand out would be cut out of it. The
Hmm.
heart rate monitor, timing, some of the quick time events and gameplay moments require absolute precise timing, otherwise somebody will die.
Yeah.
And that's it would lose something with the amount of latency involved in a service like that providing a game like that. A cinematic experience like that. I like Man of Medan as a game, as an idea. It's not a game with combat, but it
Mhm.
is a game theoretically. Your goal is to keep everybody alive. And at any point from anything, anyone can die.
If I can provide a moot argument, just from my generation growing up, we saw things like the Halo films, we saw things like the Super Mario films,
Yeah.
and I would say that those don't work. They don't capture what the video game is trying to portray. Max
Now see,
Payne, the film, was not as good as the game.
growing up after the fact, seeing all of that shit later on, I come at it from a totally different perspective. I appreciate those older video game movies way more for not trying to be direct copies of their video game material and not being so far out of the way and so poorly produced that they become blood rain.
Wow. Or Aeon
Uh,
Flux, which
Aeon Flux.
Aeon Flux has good action scenes. It's a bad movie with good action scenes.
The Terminal Realities video games got a very shitty movie treatment. Aeon Flux was a good game. with a bad movie to go with it. Blood Rain was a good couple of games with a series of terrible movies, each progressively getting worse. U-Bowl has no idea what he's doing. Silent Hill came out around the time I was, 2005, the Silent Hill movie came out. And that was my first exposure to Silent Hill.
I am so sorry.
Yeah, not exactly a great first. And I appreciated the video game so much more when I played it the first time because I was like, wow, that movie was shit. And I'm so happy that we have other good video game movies like Mortal Kombat the movie and Super Mario Brothers. Come to find out, when I got older, nobody agreed with me. The consensus was that those were also bad movies. I would argue, after some of the modern video game movies we've had, those aren't even close to bad.
It's also like a matter of like perspective and understanding of the game that you're a fan of, which makes it really
Yeah.
complicated. Like the Sonic movie, in my opinion, is a very good movie because it strikes a chord with the Sonic. It resonates with what Sonic is. The Silent Hill films
Castlevania.
did not.
Castlevania, the
The
series
anime,
from
yeah,
Netflix,
very
does
good.
not follow the Castlevania story to an exact. But the guy that did Spawn and the other one of the other writers from Vertigo came forward, wrote an amazing, mature Castlevania story, and produced one of the greatest pieces of video game spin-off media ever. That's a bold claim, but I truly believe that Castlevania is up there with something that is totally never going to be created again. There's never going to be anything else like it. It is unique in and of itself. It did something that only it could do.
I'm gonna spin the table here for a second. Um, Knowing what you know now, do you think the media franchises should move forward with more film adaptations of video games?
Yes, but they need to be done properly, either by directors who know what they're doing or direct fans from YouTube, content creators who know what they're doing. They need budgets. They need real script writers who give a shit about the property that they're writing for. And as Hollywood gets younger, more and more people working in the film industry play video games. The opportunity to make good video game movies is now.
It's interesting that you say that because although I don't 100% share your sentiment, I do agree with some of what you're saying. I personally wouldn't mind seeing video game adaptation films and television shows, but one of the things that really bothers me is everything tries to connect to the already existing universe.
Don't
And
do that.
I think it's
It's
just
very
better not to do that. Yeah, just
yeah.
this is not canon.
Netflix's Cowboy Bebop is such a sad story. They were doing their own thing for a while, and you can continue it through the new comic book series that's coming out for it. But it was a good take on an old story, and it was given to a good cast and a
Hmm.
good team and people who really wanted to do what they wanted to do with it, the things that they would have done to make it their vision of it. And that's fine. They weren't trying to be the exact same thing, and they'd tell you that right away.
Yeah,
It's such a sad story. And the fact that it got canceled after one season, halfway through, I mean, it wasn't even halfway through.
no.
It's just so sad. That was a thing that deserved a better chance.
So if I may, I just want to like throw out some games that people probably don't know have a lot of anime and video game adaptations. Um, Dead Space has an anime adaptation that was okay. Devil May Cry has an anime adaptation that was actually pretty decent, but shouldn't be viewed as canon.
Persona 3, the animation is
It was
amazing.
very good, very good. Um, Dragon's Dogma has an animation. It's very good.
I Yeah, that one is kind of acquired taste though.
I
Like
Yeah,
3D anime itself
yeah,
is already an acquired taste.
yeah. You have the Final Fantasy animes, which I mean, if you
I
just watch them on their own, they're pretty default, not great.
If you've ever seen the movie if you're a fan of Final Fantasy VII, and I'm not really, right? I like Crisis Core, and I think Dirge of Cerberus is a good meme. But Advent Children, as its own movie, is a very well produced
Oh
movie.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But the story's shit.
Oh yeah, it's garbage. It's absolute trash. What story?
But like before you watch a film like that, look at when it was released and then tell us that it's not incredible what they accomplished.
All of Reach.
A Fall of Reach is so good. So good. Halo Legends, incredible.
Yep.
Um but there's a lot. I mean, there's the
Super Mario Brothers Super Show, as big a meme as it is, absolutely incredible for the time. The Legend of Zelda, the cartoon, it equally is incredible.
ignore. Dude, we don't talk about that.
Listen, just because everybody else is memes and memes everything and life is memes doesn't mean that I can't fucking enjoy
You can enjoy
fucking
anything you want.
cartoons from like 10 years before I was born.
Listen, man, nobody's telling you you can't enjoy it. Enjoy whatever you want.
That is, yeah, enjoy whatever you want.
Absolutely. But just don't tell me it's good when it's not.
It is. I'd like to see anybody else put in the amount of animating work that went into those shows.
Oh yeah, I agree. You're right. But
I
there.
also have to come at it from that perspective. You know, I'm an animator. That's a
Mhm.
I am an insider. I have developed games. I am an animator. I am an artist. There are things that I look at from that perspective. I'm always looking at the psychology. There are just so many angles to thinking about stuff like this.
I'm gonna turn the table one more time because you brought up animation. How much of video games would you say influenced your progress in life? What did it do for you in terms of direction?
I would say a good 80% of my life was driven by the video games I played.
It's so interesting because I I guess I'm gonna out myself here. I originally studied to be a doctor. I wanted to go to med school to be an epidemiologist professionally with a doctorate. I ended up just doing underwork in epidemiology. Obviously, I got hurt, and then I started playing video games. And I was like, oh, I like drawing, I like art. I'm gonna go be an artist. And then I joined an advertising class because it was on the same campus, and it ultimately led me to dropping out.
Yeah.
But video games, uh, when and Red can attest to my skill these days. I really like doing lighting design, story drafting, mechanical drafting. Video games have influenced my life to a point where now that I'm completely okay with who I am as a person, I can proudly say, yeah, that's what I want to do for a living.
Yeah. I've known since the beginning of time that my life would always turn itself back to video games because that's just the thing I love.
That's
It's the source of every good part of my life to date.
Do you have video game
I
tattoos?
Yeah, I have an Oblivion tattoo on my left arm and a little Triforce a little bit lower on it.
You have a Triforce tattoo?
Yeah, it's really small.
I want to high five you. Guess who else has a Triforce tattoo?
Nice.
Did you know I have a
And
Toy Story tattoo?
I did not.
Across my
That's a
chest.
weird thing to have.
Yeah, it's across my chest too. Yeah, I have a Full Metal Alchemist tattoo, and then I have a Deadpool on my leg, and I have a Toy Story and a Triforce.
Weird.
I also have a Skater Died Paulo Peralta tattoo.
That's great. That's incredible. Shoutouts to Stacy Peralta still releasing footage today. Still directing skate videos well into his 60s. Shoutouts to Tony Alva for still skating.
Right. And then I have two Banksy pieces on my back, which if you guys don't know, I love graffiti. Graffiti is one of the most beautiful forms of expression ever, in my opinion.
I've I've still only got tattoos down one arm.
You, we don't have to get into that. um, man, it's insane how much of our lives have been influenced by video games. Like I've only been a big gamer for like the last 7 years. It's interesting to talk to somebody who has been a gamer their entire life and is so
It is.
passionate.
And it's incredible just how big the scope of influence from video games is on the world over. Without video games, we wouldn't have so many great technologies today. It pioneered VR development. It led to the development of so many great accessibility technologies that we wouldn't have had before. Video games have paved the way through charities, through actions from large people who give a shit about real world problems going on. There are so many things that video games do outside of just being video games that influence the entire world.
I would say video games is one of the most important things to connect the world at this point. I love getting on and talking to people from Australia, California. I mean, obviously I'm in New York, so California's on the other side of the continent. But I mean, I've had friends from Alaska, Canada, Brazil, and that's so cool to me. Meeting people that like live in Japan and stuff like that. Like, I feel so connected to the world when I'm playing video games.
And even those pissed off people can get channel their anger and wake up the next morning feeling great, just putting it all into something fast paced like Call of Duty. There is a video game for everybody, and whether or not we like every video game, if it works for you, it works for you. There's definitely a reason you like it so much.
Oh yeah, and I'm gonna kind of shift the commentary here. One of the things that makes me really excited is the more acceptance of women in gaming moving forward. I'm proud to say that we have women as moderators in our group and everything. Like, I never understood why, and this might not have been in your generation. This is probably a more of a my generation problem.
Yeah, this is definitely a your generation problem. I was gonna say, I've seen girls playing video games since could speak. That's nothing new to me. My mom played video games.
In my generation, it was frowned upon. It was very bizarre to me, and I never understood why.
Yeah, I never got that. I knew that that was a problem, and then I would see people like Anita Sarkeesian later on in life trying to create a problem out of it again, and I was like, "But we already have games like Beyond Good and Evil and Eternal Darkness who have amazing female protagonists, and there are so many amazing women playing video games for YouTube all the time already. In its earliest days, there were women doing Let's Play videos on YouTube."
Oh yeah. And the other thing is, I'm really proud of our community for stepping up and standing against companies like Bungie who have had sexual harassment issues. And I'm really proud of the community for stepping up to
Vision?
Activision. Oh, Bungie had issues as well.
I
Uh,
didn't know that.
yeah, they had a lot of issues with female writers and stuff like that, and changing women voice actors' lines right before they go into the room and things like that. It was a lot of issues there. I just I've never seen a community, and being a skateboarder, skateboarding is
Speaking
very open. You know what I mean?
I don't mean to divert the conversation,
Oh,
but for
you're
just a
fine.
second, I have to say it is uh cancer heart disease research awareness day. Wearing red for heart disease awareness. It's a big problem among women specifically. Heart disease affects way more women than it does men. It's a huge problem, and there's a lot of research going that goes into like trying to solve the problem. You can really be a part of something big. I hope everybody celebrated at least or wore something red somewhere or spread the word about it, get cared a little bit, gave it a thought, a glancing thought once throughout the day.
I made a Facebook post stating you should go get your heart looked at.
Yeah. I haven't said anything, so I figure I'll let this be what I say about that. And
No, I appreciate
it
that.
was a
That's
good
awesome.
good segue into that.
I, I hope that our content inspires people to look at things more realistically, and I just want to end. I know that it is getting better, but I still see people who are like, "Oh, you just watch female streamers cuz titty streamers." And it's like, I don't like sentiments like that. And I've been at fault for saying things I didn't mean, against some female gamers on Twitch and things like that, but when I get on Twitch and I get on YouTube and I see females streaming, it puts a smile on my face to see that we have officially broken down that social barrier.
Yeah. Going through school growing up, seeing YouTube growing up, a lot of just general equality was what I witnessed. So when I became an adult and I started noticing politics and the people much older than me still arguing about issues that I just didn't see growing up, I was like, I thought these issues were like 100 years old, guys.
They
What
are.
are you doing?
They are 100 years old, but the core of the issue is people are still being raised with those stereotypes.
Yeah. And
We
that's sad. It's stereotyping from a time your children understand you is just a bad practice.
and I agree. I 100% agree. It is a bad practice that we need to stop. I mean, there are so many amazing female developers. I, I, I mean, even trans, different races and things like that. Those barriers are being eroded, and that makes me so proud because I don't understand those barriers at all. As like a human being who just wants to see people thrive, I don't understand those barriers at all.
That's why it's always awesome when I see Professor Juice doing something new, because it's her lively, she's so alive and charismatic and excitable. She's got a great personality. She's very insightful about the games that she plays. There's just, there is no social construct to it when I watch when I watch her content. It's just she makes good content, and that's what I like. That's great.
I mean, there's so many amazing female creators that I watch these days. I mean, say what you will. I mean, Pokimane, Pushing Up Roses, and all those characters. I mean, they have their flaws. Everybody has their flaws, but attacking their sex or gender is illogical. It's not because it's a woman. It's because you have an issue with their opinion, and that's been
Even then, why would you attack somebody for their opinion?
right. Right. I agree. Like, wouldn't a healthy conversation be better? I mean, we literally dedicated ourselves to producing a podcast challenging each other's opinions.
Yeah.
And I say
And
that,
it always ends with the same, yeah, that's fine, whatever.
yeah, I mean, we put on this show, but what people don't know is we talk for like 8 hours a day. Like
Uh,
this,
a wide variety of the same shit we talk about here.
yeah, we could literally make 8 hour long podcasts every single day if we wanted to, but we choose not to. We decided to engross our thoughts into one manifestation and then push it forward. Not that we can ever stay on topic.
What is a topic?
Fuck
I need
topics.
one.
Topics are dumb. I like the conversation. It's more important. When people are so quick and taking things out of context, and this happens with video games quite frequently, um, it doesn't help anything. Like when people try to argue about Bioshock, for instance, Bioshock Infinite as like this huge deviation from what Bioshock was. It's like, no, it wasn't. It was not a deviation at all. This is what
Yeah.
Bioshock had been talking about the entire time.
Yeah, it was really like literally the same story they had been telling for 3 games for
Another one is
before
Resident Evil.
System Shock.
This is something that annoys you pretty often, and I know that you might want to rant about it, but Resident Evil is not a game about zombies. It's a game about biological terrorism
I
and
say
how
that all
humans
the time.
suck.
It is not a game about zombies.
Yeah, it's about shitty people doing shitty things.
Yeah, it's about a massive pharmaceutical corporation selling bioterror combat data. That is there's the crux of the issue in Resident Evil.
Yeah,
And all of the bioweapons that go along with it and the action and some of the crazier shit, that's just stage pieces to add to that underlying story that makes it so much more interesting.
the same thing can be said about Silent Hill, 1 through 3. Say what you will about 3. But the core of the story is Alessa's soul was split by a cult and she is suffering, and you are drawn there as a shitty person trying to do your best to help her. You're in a shit situation trying to do your best to help a little kid. It's not a bad story. So many people think that it's a bad story. It's not.
No.
They're shitty
And
people. You should hate the characters
mhm.
100%.
But it doesn't make it a bad story.
No.
It just means that the story being told is like you watch Death Note full well knowing that Light is the villain.
Yes.
That's what that show is about.
Which then falls into a subjective characterization, subjective characterization, which is really good in writing. There are people who defend Harry Mason.
Yeah.
Like, it's just the way it is. There's people who defend Light. It's just the way it is. But when you take the game out of context, that's what happens. But when you look at it from the context that is being portrayed, you can know, oh, Harry's not a good guy at all.
No. Yeah, that's just not how the character is written.
Or Silent Hill 2, for instance, you should not like
James
that character.
Sunderland.
James Sunderland is a piece of shit.
Silent Hill 4, what's his name? He is
Oh, yeah.
quite the character.
Yeah, let's not get into that. That is some fucked up stuff. That game talks about some really dark stuff. Another one would be like Evil Within. You know,
Evil Within is an extremely interesting game about uh, a simulation, effectively.
yeah. But it's also a conversation of misunderstanding, misappropriation, um, fear of death, loss, guilt, dealing with
Yeah.
grief, kidnapping. It's so much more than just this revenge quest. It's not even a revenge quest, first of all. I don't know why that is commonly associated with Evil Within.
Because
It
Evil Within 2 is sort of a revenge quest.
two
The
is, but
first one
one
was
isn't.
no, yeah.
So, these are the kind of stories that are really important to me. These are what I understand as somebody who is a gamer first and foremost. I there is no objective discernible out of context here. When I see out of context, it just tells me you didn't play the game.
Yeah.
And that happens on YouTube quite often. And I'm sure we make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. You shouldn't go after somebody for making a mistake. It is completely
Many of
understandable.
my old videos I would go back and do differently, knowing the things I know now, having played through many of the things I played through then, much more now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm in the exact same boat. Even with this podcast, I'm sure we have said things that people disagree with or we are wrong about, but that's okay.
We disagree with each other quite often, and I'm sure in some of those moments there's somebody out there who disagrees with both of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, emotionally, just video games it bring out so much when you tell a story and when you're in the context and you understand what the world that you're placed in, it just gives you so much more.
That
Playing,
is why I am a huge fan of point and click adventure games.
oh, so good.
They innovated interaction with the world around you.
Name a game. It doesn't have to be a point and click, no. Just name a game where you feel like so many people misconstrue what they're trying to say.
Mm,
I mean,
that's a
obviously.
hard one. Let me look at my Steam list real quick.
Go ahead. I mean, obviously, I could say Resident Evil. I can say, um, there's a lot of games, but I'm actually gonna say Alien Isolation. Um, the Alien franchise was discussing xenophobia. The whole concept of it was fear of the unknown. You're not supposed to just fear the alien. You're supposed to fear the unknown. What you're supposed to be afraid of is fear itself. You don't know why it's happening. It's not just the alien. It's everything. There are no answers. That's the point.
Okay, I looked at my list. Max Payne 3, a game I feel people misconstrue all the time. And it's hard for me to wrap my thoughts around, but after my third playthrough not that long ago, I finally pieced it together. Max Payne 3 isn't a game about Max Payne being addicted to painkillers and liquor and falling over all the time because of those things. Max Payne 3 is about the after effects of being exposed to Valkyr in the first game and living with that for the rest of his life, while still being dragged into the same situations.
Yep. Max Payne 3 is literally a commentary on grief and pain and loss.
It's
And
unfortunate. It's a story about sacrifice.
yeah,
He took the drugs so that he could see what they were seeing and stay alive long enough to take down the bad guy. In the process, putting himself through one of the worst nightmares somebody could go through because he ingested more of it than any human ever should have.
Max Payne
It's a
3, I
stuff
mean,
that was known for like being touchy with its subjects already. Some people couldn't handle tiny doses of it.
I don't even like Max Payne 3, and I'm going to agree with you.
Yeah. It's a game that people misconstrue all the time. Nobody really knows what's happening in Max Payne 3. And like it's really easy to not see exactly what's going on.
Interesting that our consensus of this video at this point has just been You need to look at video games differently because we as gamers have just been
Not
annoyed.
just video games. We brought up so many other
Oh yeah,
subjects.
absolutely.
Opinion is varied. Subjective nature is subjective. Things that you want to think about. Because you probably have some thoughts.
Eden and I earlier were discussing music. We talk about music quite often because Eden is a music guy. If you want to check out Eden's work, it's Fusion Eden on YouTube. Makes amazing music. He sings in Japanese. It's awesome. Um,
Good stuff.
oh, thank you, thank you. He's so good. He's so fucking talented. I praise the ground he walks on. I swear to God, Eden's awesome. Um, but we were talking about music, and I was bringing up 8D, 12D, 100D, and things like that, distortion music, blah, blah, blah. And we were talking about subgenres and things like that. And we got to the point where we were like, what is the most emotional song in your life? Like, what is the most important song that you just feel like nobody else resonates with? And he shared me his, and I can't pronunciate it because it's in Japanese, but I learned a lot about him through that song. And then he was like, well, what's yours? And mine's Cage the Elephant, Shake Me Down. It is one of the most important songs in my life. I cannot listen to it. It makes me cry every single time. And it's hard to explain. If you want to listen to it, go listen to it. You will not understand. But watch the music video and really try to understand what they're saying. It is so sad. But the subjective consensus is that it's not a sad song when it really, really, really is.
I'm that way with Laura Shigihara's "Everything's Alright" from To the Moon.
Oh,
Contextually, like it's
bro,
such a sad song. It
bro.
resonates so hard.
Such a good song, though. But it's the same thing with video games. I mean, everything is subjective. You need to communicate with the person you're talking about and try to understand their side. Video games have taught me that.
Communication is a big part of it. Listening is also another big part of it. You can't just be like, no, every time somebody says something you disagree with just because you disagree with it.
it
Taking the time to listen and let them finish is important.
it's healthy to say why.
Yeah.
And the reason why video games have taught me this lesson is because in a lot of video games, your character is not making decisions. You are making the decisions. And if you are not paying attention or understanding the context, you will make mistakes.
Hotel Dusk, Room 215 is a big game of why.
Hmm.
That's a very deep and personal game to me. It was one of the first times I delved my head into investigation of any kind. One of the first times I really sat down and had to think about what was going on around me. And the characters that you're surrounded with, Kyle himself, your player character, the decisions you're left making, the way he thinks, the way you would think with those thoughts, it all comes together into this. Everybody is going to look at that game and see it differently.
Hmm. Silent Hill, Resident Evil, Life is Strange.
Life is Strange is a really good example.
I mean, if you play through Life is Strange and you don't pay attention to what the hell is going on, you will fuck up every step of the way.
I don't care for Heavy Rain. I don't care for Beyond Two Souls. I don't care for Detroit Become Human. But the game Fahrenheit,
Oh, yeah.
masterpiece.
This is a conversation that really leads to one of my writings, Last Particle. We're not going to talk about too heavily, but you can see where that emotion and that thought process is being put into that game.
It's something you care about. Showing care about the thing that you're I mean, being passionate about things is it's I can't even collect my thoughts on it. It's hard to explain passion. It's just something that is. You know what you have passion when you have it.
Yes, yes, and that's one of the most important things that I hope to portray in the Last Particle is you, the player, are making decisions, and every single one of them is important. You need to have the context to the world around you. You need to take the time to understand why. And it's not the greater scheme that's going to be occurring in the last particle that's going to be the why scenario. It's you, the person. Why? Not
When a game
no.
like when a game like Dark Souls 1 throws you into a world of why.
Yes. Bloodborne. I mean, there's so many titles. Dusk. Doom.
Dusk and Doom are great as a Quake.
Quake. Yeah. Oblivion. Literally Oblivion.
Yeah.
You're
Morrowind.
why
Honestly,
why did he have this, like, what is my history? What got me here? First of all, why am I in this prison? We don't even know. He straight up asks, "Why am I here?" And he never gets context on that. Or she, he, whatever. Uh,
I was telling you yesterday that we may have figured out Skyrim's introduction finally.
Interesting.
Yeah, that Dark Brotherhood thing may be Skyrim's introduction, and that's an interesting take on that. The fact that
Ooh.
that is one of the few games with an explanation for its introduction in that series, very interesting diversion. Didn't mean to divert the
Oh,
topic.
that's fine. Is it a theory, or is there evidence that is mounting?
There's I mean, it's pretty much confirmed evidence that the player character gets attacked by the it gets a contracted a hit by the Dark Brotherhood, tries to flee Skyrim, ends up at the beginning, the way things go down, and gets saved by the Alduin, and that's just kind of how that goes.
Interesting.
Yeah. Every fact from the lore points to that being the case. All of the basic evidence in game points to that being the case. So it and the Elder Scrolls Arena are the only games where you have like a definitive beginning, and Oblivion is the only game where you have a definitive end.
Interesting. So to wrap this all up, do you have anything that you want to say, like like emotional wise, towards video games, anything like that?
Video games mean a lot to everyone, everywhere, all the time. Everyone's got a story about video games, and somebody somewhere would like to hear that. Say it in the comments, talk to a friend about it, get to know your friends and what their history of video games is like, because it's something worth doing. It's something that'll bring you together more. Video games do that. They help us connect.
But not the Connect.
Not the Connect helped Ghost Hunters connect.
Oh, ghost
Yeah.
hunting.
Yeah. So even video
Interesting.
games helped even ghost hunting.
Wow.
That's a fact.
Paranormal.
Wow.
And all I have to say is it's pretty much the same. Like, I'm somebody who was not a 100% gamer my entire life, but the coolest people I've ever met are gamers. The life that I'm living now is so fun and enjoyable because of the escapism. I get to experience things and share things with people like this, and I like hearing people's stories. So please, yeah, if you want to share your story, come join the Discord, talk to us. You know, we want to hear that kind of stuff, and we want to get to know other people for those thoughts. I would love to know Jacksepticeye's story behind why he loves video games, Markiplier's, all those guys. Like,
Every new perspective is an interesting perspective.
recently, wasn't it Markiplier was like, "Oh, I love this space strategy game," and he like freaked out that they're remaking it or making a second one, and nobody understood why.
Because he loves space.
Oh, and yes, but we know that it was a game that was bought to him by his father, and we don't have to get into this too much, but like,
Just one of the
and
few
that made him,
really sentimental games to him.
yeah, that's about all
Same
we
way he
know.
was so into Doom. Doom was an out of place, out of character play for his entire channel, and it came out of nowhere. And it was kind of confusing at first, but it made sense ultimately.
Because he started getting into his history within that series. So,
Yeah.
and yeah, there's just, I like to know why, especially people
The
my
whys.
age.
The whys are very important.
And
Understanding each other, our reasons help us understand each other.
Markiplier is only 4 years older than me.
Y'all are old, man.
Yeah, we're old. I made my channel around the same time he did.
My God. My God. I was like 11 watching Markiplier in his 20s.
Mhm.
It's hard to think back that far, but like the dawn of YouTube was a special period for me, just as much as video games were. And they were two things that went hand in hand.
I mentioned that I lived in a dosh house earlier. If you guys don't know what a dosh house is, it's a house with only like 2 or 3 rooms, but like 12 people live in it because the economy sucks, and that's the reality of the situation. I loved it. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I was robbed and blah blah blah, and people brought drugs to the house and things like that, and it sucked. But as a life experience, it was extremely cool. But I remember some of my housemates, they would watch like PewDiePie and stuff in the living room, and those were like some of my first experiences with video games and YouTube culture. And it inspired me because I was like, oh, I'm hurt. I like video games. I have a PS4. PS4s can stream. I'm going to stream off my PS4. And I did it. It was fun. Wow, that takes me back. Share Factory. Remember Share Factory content?
LimeWire.
But yeah, I mean, like, it's interesting to reflect on then and now what video games have done for me. I feel like I'm more educated, I'm more patient, I have a place to express myself, I have a place to get rid of my aggression. I used to get out my aggression on skateboarding and things like that, but now I can get on Wolfenstein and kill Nazis. You know, and stuff like that is important because if you have a place to relieve yourself, I know that's a piss joke, but it is really good. And these kinds of conversations are important. Red and I will walk away from this closer friends because of it.
Yeah. Having a good conversation really does help people understand each other. Knowing the whys, knowing the context, just interacting. We are social creatures.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm sure there's things that I know there's things I disagree with that you've said in this video, but I'm sure that you've disagreed with some of the things that I said. But the fact of the matter is you understand my context and respect me enough as a person to be like, okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
I'm never going to tell you you're wrong for your opinion.
Yeah. And it's the same thing to the audience. Like, you as an audience member enjoying this video or maybe not enjoying it, disagreeing with both of us. Who knows? Maybe some of you like me more than Red. None of that's wrong. It's
Wow.
fine.
Wow. Yeah, fine. Fuck me, right?
Maybe they like you and hate me. I don't know. Who knows until they tell us. Um, but yeah, go subscribe to Red Barrel FTW, as you can see on screen. That's how you spell it. Give him a follow. You're doing Elder Scrolls content right now, right?
Not on my main channel, no. It's on some other side channel. I'll leave it up to everyone else to find. Don't name it. We'll just leave that there, and somebody will figure it out.
Okay. Um, I'm doing Let's Plays still. Obviously, I'm producing the podcast. We have more Argurity coming up
Yeah.
soon. We just need to get a hold of Chris.
I've got some Zenith stuff coming up soon.
Ooh.
Eat.
So yeah, leave your recommendations down below. Tell us a story. Join the Discord. Subscribe to my channel and subscribe to Red's channel for more stuff like this. And let's try to have a healthy conversation. I think that's important. You know, respond to people. Don't argue. Just respond.
Yeah.
Be like, hey, that's your opinion, but like, here's mine. And look at how we're different. Isn't that interesting? How we don't view things the same way?
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Let's have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
I mean, a lot of problems in the video game space, I think, can be resolved by having healthy discussions. I mean, loot boxes, PUBG, or battle royales, things like that. I know a lot of people hate them, but I mean, I hate them, but people like them, and we need to respect the fact that people like that stuff, and there's nothing we can really do about it.
there's an argument to be made about the ethics, which
Oh,
ultimately
absolutely.
lies in subjective thought, right? Like with the side that's thinking about it. Ultimately, a lot of it stems from the information we get, why we have those opinions, and that's why the why is so important.
Hmm. Like, I personally feel like loot boxes are gambling and should not exist. That's just how I feel.
That's a topic for another day.
Ooh, you want to make a whole episode on that?
Oh yeah.
Ooh, let's get into it. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.